So as you may have found if you watched our first impressions, I actually went into Infinite Warfare not expecting a whole lot and came out of it pretty impressed. Now that I've sunk a good 15 hours into the game, I've finished the campaign, I've played a lot of the multiplayer, I've done the zombie stuff, well, it's really good. I know that no one actually wants to hear that. I know that everyone wants to hate on it. I know that Infinite Warfare is about as hated as something like Ghostbusters, but to be completely honest, it's a very well produced, very immaculately well playing game. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and this is Call of Duty Infinite Warfare's full review. So the story in Infinite Warfare is incredibly basic. You've got Kit Harington playing this guy called Admiral Koch. Now he's just an incredibly evil dude who's just one-dimensional. He's a big evil guy. He's got an evil force of dudes called the Settlement Defense Front, and they need to be wiped out. After humanity's left Earth and colonized a whole bunch of different planets, turns out the SDF have set up all sorts of compounds around the place, and it's your job to take them out before they form what is ostensibly the Empire from Star Wars. And that's pretty much all you get. Now you'll be playing as this main character called Reyes and their best friend Salter. You only get to play as Reyes, but you hang out with Salter a hell of a lot. The two of you are going to be going out there and taking care of all sorts of side missions and main missions, attempting to bring down the SDF wherever they pop up. That is literally the narrative. There are some really emotional moments that kind of come out of nowhere, and to be honest, because you don't expect it out of Call of Duty, it hits you way harder than something like Battlefield 1. I was completely blindsided by a couple of the moments in Infinite Warfare, especially the way that it all wraps up, and to be honest, it highlighted the whole thing in a way that I really didn't see coming. Now the game looks amazing. As you can tell in our first impressions, I came away just being really blown away. I think that it's actually one of the best looking games we've got this generation. Now the nearest comparison is going to be Battlefield 1, and yes, something like Uncharted 4 or Battlefield does look stunning, but when you look at Infinite Warfare in motion, the amount of animation that goes into every single NPC or main character, the depth of field effects, the lighting, the character renders, the facial animation, its general graphical presentation is just absolutely dripping in wealth and cash. Every facet of this game's presentation has been amped up. It's absolutely phenomenal in motion, and there's no graphical hitches, there's no frame rate drops. It just looks incredibly smooth from start to finish. I didn't encounter a single glitch, bug, or anything like that. Not to say that those things don't exist, and obviously online you're going to encounter lag and things like that, but personally for me, especially the campaign, start to finish, that thing was one hell of a thrill ride. At this stage, you know how a Call of Duty game plays. Now, following Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3, you can tell that developers Infinity Ward have tried to do more with the wall running and the boost jumping and things like that. A lot of things that really annoy the vast majority of Call of Duty players because it doesn't feel like Call of Duty. Now, objectively, these things work. I don't think they're as smooth as something like Titanfall, but you do have a boost meter, something that you can use to do an assisted jump, say run along a wall, boost slide. Now it does all feed off the same meter, so it's not like you can infinitely chain these things together, say wall running, boost sliding, shooting a guy, double jumping, whatever. It's not like Titanfall 2. You do have to ration your abilities out based on how much this meter will drain, but it still allows for a little bit of free-form experimentation when you're coming up against so many enemies at once. However, all that stuff was in Black Ops 3. In terms of genuinely new mechanics, you've got the flying and the zero-G segments. Now I'll get to the zero-G stuff in a second because it's the only thing that prevents this game from scoring higher. But the flying stuff, the stuff where you get to pilot your ship called the Jackal, that's pretty well done. I think that although it does feel like you're flying around in what would be like a mech suit or something, because you can turn on your axis whenever you need to, you can line up shots with any enemy within a few seconds, you don't really have to bank your ship around. It can feel a little bit weightless, it can feel a little bit like you're sort of just rotating constantly in midair, and if you were to see what was going on from a third-person perspective, it would just look ridiculous. But Call of Duty does manage to get away with that stuff, and despite some of the dogfights being overwhelmingly chaotic, which again is another problem with Call of Duty, sometimes it just doesn't know when to take its foot off the accelerator, overall these sections come together pretty well. Sadly, the same cannot be said about the zero-G segments. Now, these were introduced, they only pop up a couple of times in the campaign, unless you decide to do more of the side missions, but most of the time when you're about to infiltrate a ship or something, you'll be allowed to float towards it, rotating your view using left and right on the D-pad, and you can boost around, you can go higher or lower, you can actually grapple towards enemies and take them out. The problem with this is that it's just very, very hard to take cover. You end up just being shot from all angles, and because the game's damage indicator just says like, hey, there's someone over here somewhere shooting at you, amongst the debris, amongst the general graphical presentation of ships and stars and sun flares and whatever, it's very hard to get a beat on your opponents, and 9 times out of 10, you'll just be absolutely destroyed within a few seconds. On the higher difficulties especially, these levels are just absolutely infuriating. Now, the problem with Call of Duty is the same one that's been around for years now, in that the game's pace, the game's tone, it hardly ever abates from just being, oh my god, everything's exploding, oh Jesus Christ. And after a while, it's mind-numbing, and there's only a couple of points in the campaign where, like I said, it takes its foot off the accelerator and you can breathe for a second. There's a really cool stealth mission where you infiltrate a compound, headshotting guys. It's a little bit reminiscent of All Gillied Up, which is really, really cool from the original Modern Warfare, but for the most part, everything is exploding, everyone is shouting, everything is crashing all around you. You're constantly taking damage from either enemies that are shooting at you or some sort of scripted sequence where you're supposed to be taking damage. Releasing alongside Modern Warfare, you can see exactly how that campaign was structured. There are a lot of things that made the bigger moments of Modern Warfare resonate because we were allowed the breathing room in between. As Call of Duty's got much bigger over the years, it's kind of lost sight of that. It's very much what you can expect out of Call of Duty, although despite the fact that they've gotten rid of the special classes from Black Ops 3, you now have rigs, which are pretty much just the same thing. You step into a wearable rig, and then you have special weapons that can be triggered by pressing L1 and R1 at the same time. They're nearly all the same. They're nearly all instant death-bringing machine guns or rocket launchers or whatever else. At the end of the day, there are only a couple of new modes. I would highlight Frontline as one of the best ones. This is something where you spawn in a base and you actually have spawn protection, and you score differently based on whether you take out opponents outside of your base or whether you let them come to you. Now, if enemies do enter your base, you can see them, which is really cool. You know that if you go into an enemy base, you're up against all the odds, and surmounting that stuff is really, really rewarding. But for the most part, though, it's a twitch shooter, it's reaction-based. You're going to need to play this thing for a long time to get very good at it. I mean, you're going up against people that have probably been playing this for 9 years solid. So to actually make a dent in Call of Duty these days requires a lot of commitment. Next up on the multiplayer front is Zombies, and for this year, they're continuing the whole WTF's going on type stuff by going with a 80s retro-themed horror house carnival thing. Look, to be honest, this stuff doesn't resonate with me at all. Objectively, it mechanically plays very, very well. It's just what you've come to expect. The big difference this year is that being 80s themed, you have a way better soundtrack underneath everything, and over time you'll get to hang out with David Hasselhoff or Seth Green, who pops up, again, randomly. Now, it's worth noting on the multiplayer front that the game does rely on microtransactions for some of its weapons. You're going to literally need to fork out real-world cash to afford some of these things. And as much as there's a lot of weapons on offer just in the base game, you'll unlock a hell of a lot of mods, weapons, and augments for your guns anyway. There's still that reality that there are some guns locked behind paywalls. So to wrap up, here are 3 things that you need to know. First up, the spectacle of the campaign makes it all worthwhile. The general production value that's gone into this thing from start to finish is just immaculate. The campaign itself is worth a purchase. Now, Infinite Warfare's campaign is very much the over-the-top rollercoaster ride that you've come to expect, but with some really cool emotional moments and really good character development in there that highlights it above the likes of Black Ops 3 and above the likes of Advanced Warfare. Second up, the villain just sucks. There's no depth given to Admiral Koch whatsoever. He's evil for evil's sake. He does evil things, he says evil things. It's, that's kind of it. You're given a target to take down. That's it. Number 3, you will get destroyed on multiplayer. You just will. Unless you're someone who's been playing Call of Duty regularly or are used to twitch shooters, you really need to play the game enough to quote-unquote get in the zone and start getting used to how to use corners, how to deploy your special abilities at the right time, when not to sprint, how to zero in on guys that are far away from you. It's very much a learning process, and you need to put the time in to learn it. So all in all, I was pretty impressed by Infinite Warfare. I do think the campaign outshines the multiplayer simply because we've seen this multiplayer mold in so many iterations over the years, but it's worth a purchase for the campaign alone. To be honest, I came out of it being very, very thoroughly impressed. If you're looking for another installment of Call of Duty, it ticks all the boxes, providing you can get on board with the sci-fi stuff, hence the lack of a 5th star.